Chapter 23. Although Mike could feel chomping teeth against the bandages on his leg, he was pretty sure that the cupcake was getting mostly a mouthful of gauze and padding. It hadn't yet managed to sink its teeth into the meat of his leg. Mike flung his leg against the floor, using the hard surface to scrape the cupcake off him. The cupcake tumbled back. Mike immediately scrabbled toward the cattle prod. When Mike was still a couple feet from the weapon, he stretched out his fingers. He was almost. Mike screamed as a jagged jolt of pain shot up his leg. He looked back. The cupcake had reattached, and this time it got a better grip. It had a healthy mouthful of Mike's calf, and it was starting to gnaw its way up Mike's leg, like it was an ear of corn. Mike flipped over and started using his right leg to kick the cupcake on his left leg. The cupcake hung on as Mike stomped at it. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, his heel managed to land square in the center of the cupcake's googly-eyed base. The blow wrenched the cupcake free of Mike's leg. Unfortunately, it took a good-sized chunk of Mike's calf with it when it tumbled away. Mike was hit with a wave of nausea, but he ignored it. He also ignored the rush of liquid warmth pouring down his leg. He had to get the kettle prod. Mike surged toward the prod, and he grabbed it. He fumbled to find the power switch. A clutter followed by a waspy buzz let Mike know the cupcake was once again in motion. The buzzing sound grew louder, and Mike knew the thing had launched itself toward the back of his head. Mike spun from his stomach to his back. He brought up the cattle prod. His timing was impeccable. When he pointed the cattle prod to the space above his head, the prod skewered the cupcake right through its buck-toothed mouth. A spark show similar to the one Mike had seen on the stage, but on a smaller scale, blew up right in front of his face. The sparks came from the cupcake's round white eyes. Mike flicked the kettle prod, sending the cupcake flying. It hit the floor, rolled, and was still. That was when Mike's mind provided him with a sick vision of what would have happened if he hadn't turned over. The cupcake would have landed on the back of Mike's head. It would have chewed through him, the same way it had gone through the skull of the man Mike had found in the parson's service room. Mike shook off the unwelcome inner movie. He concentrated on getting to his feet. Abby risked a peek around the bright red and gold side of the big arcade machine. Abby didn't know what game it was. She immediately shrank back into her hiding spot. Foxy was standing at the front of the arcade, next to the smashed prize cabinet Abby had darted past less than a minute before. The animatronic, who used to be Abby's friend, was turning his head from side to side. His eyes, which were really, really bright, looked mad. He was trying to find Abby, and not for anything good. Or maybe Abby was wrong. Maybe Foxy was still her friend. Maybe he wasn't mad at her. Maybe he was worried for her. She decided to take another itsy-bitsy look. Abby braced herself against the side of the big game cabinet. She started to look forward, and her hand slid. Tiny music busted out. The machine's lights fired up. Pings and dings and beeps blooped over Abby. Foxy's head whipped around. He shot his gaze toward the look-at-me machine. Abby flattened herself against the cold metal side of the machine, while it continued to scream. "She's over here!" Abby's finger must have grazed a power button. Dumb, she thought. She should have been more careful. She shouldn't have tried to look again. She squeezed her eyes shut as she heard the stomp, stomp, stomp of Foxy's approaching footsteps. Then she chastised herself for being such a stupid baby. She shot away from the noisy machine and hurtled toward the ball pit. Once there, she quickly and quietly lowered herself into the sea of many-colored plastic balls. Right before she pulled her head under the surface, Abby snuck a look back toward where she'd been hiding. Foxy had reached the still shrilling cabinet. He looked down at it and then looked around it. Abby kept very still beneath the plastic balls. She held her breath as if she were underwater. Mike, limping heavily, reached the center of the dining room. He checked the stage. Freddy and Bonnie were still prone on the stage floor. Mike looked toward the small stage. It was empty. Where was Foxy? "Abby?" Mike called softly. He'd seen her go toward the arcade. He headed that way. Mike was still several feet from the arcade when he heard a voice calling his name. A child's voice. Mike turned, and he felt the blood drain from his face. Standing in the archway, that led to the lobby and main corridor was a little boy. A little boy with tousled black hair and bow-like lips. "Garrett?" Mike whispered. Abby had to start breathing again. She opened her mouth and took a gasp of air. And another. And another. Silent little breaths. The air didn't smell good at all. It smelled dirty and spoiled, like food that was too old. But Abby did her best to ignore the yucky stink. She held herself super-duper still. From the clumping footsteps, Abby could tell Foxy was getting close. If they'd been playing the warmer, colder game, Foxy was getting warmer. A lot warmer. More clumps. Foxy was hot, hot, hot. Abby was sure that if Foxy looked down, he'd be staring right at where she lay, hidden by the pool of brightly colored balls. She didn't move, even the teeniest, tiniest muscle. Mike walked toward his little brother. Garrett didn't move. All Garrett did was stand in the shaded archway. He stared blankly at Mike. "Garrett?" Mike said again, louder this time.
"He's here, Mike,"
Garrett said. The boy took a step backward, then a second step. "Wait!" Mike called. Mike hurried forward as fast as his leg would let him. He crossed a few feet between himself and Garrett in little more than a couple seconds. But when Mike was almost to the archway, Garrett melted away. It was as if Garrett became part of the gloaming under the archway. He was there, and then he was something else. In Garrett's place, someone in a rabbit costume appeared. Not just someone, a man. Mike could tell this from the rabbit's height, and its stride, and its grandstanding swank. The rabbit strode toward Mike. Mike put on the brakes and began backing up. He wanted to turn and run, but he couldn't take his eyes off the repellent rabbit. The animatronics were ragged and dirty, but they looked pristine compared to this atrocious costume. This rabbit suit looked like it had gone through an apocalypse. Tattered ears drooped over cloudy eyes that were surrounded by smudges of black. The rabbit's yellow fur was mottled with stains, some of which looked disturbingly like blood. Its fur was torn away in jagged strips, revealing blackened splotches beneath. But the worst part about the rabbit was that it was striding toward Mike, with a filthy toothed smile spreading beneath broken whiskers that appeared to be pointing toward Mike with very ill intent. Mike immediately went for the second taser gun on Vanessa's utility belt. He aimed. He fired. The charged metal prongs hit their mark. They landed right in the middle of the rabbit's chest. But the rabbit was unfazed. It kept coming. Mike attempted another shot, but he wasn't fast enough. The rabbit quickly closed the distance between them. Without breaking stride, the yellow rabbit ripped the taser probes from its chest. He reached Mike and swatted the taser from Mike's hand. The taser hit the floor with a crunch and a clickety-clack. From the corner of his eye, Mike saw it spin away. Before Mike could regroup, the yellow rabbit gave him a driving shove. The rabbit's strength was almost superhuman. Mike went flying backward. His body hit part of the fort that he and Abby had built with Vanessa and the animatronics, which felt like it had happened in another lifetime. When Mike landed, he was sure he heard a crack of bone. Or maybe it was just a ligament giving away. Whatever it was, it hurt. And that was just the start. As Mike crashed toward the floor, the fort above him came tumbling down. A torrent of tables dropped toward Mike like big, four-legged dominoes knocking into one another. At the same time, as if by the sheer force of the rabbit's evilness, the room was plunged into near darkness, and a fantastical laser light show began. Abby looked up through the semi-transparent layer of colored balls. Long, thick strips of light, like neon crayons, were cutting through the air over the pit. Abby thought the lights were pretty, and she wished she could see them better, but she didn't move. It was a good thing she didn't, because there was something else up there too. Abby could see the boxy shape of Foxy's head coming down toward her. Groaning, Mike extricated himself from under the pile of tables. He could feel the continual warm gush of blood flowing down his leg. His calf had been bleeding since the cupcake had taken a bite of him, and he hadn't had time to do anything about it. Now the table's impact had sped up the bleeding. Mike could feel a river of blood coursing down his leg and saturating his sock. The liquid heat wasn't confined to Mike's leg either. From the sticky wet sensations on his chest and back, he knew his other wounds had reopened too. Mike needed to move, but he couldn't seem to get himself in gear. All he could do was belly squirm across the floor. Stopping to catch his breath, Mike looked for the yellow rabbit. He had to squint to see. The constantly moving laser lights distorted everything in the room. Mike had to squint to try to separate phantom shapes from real ones. Not thankfully, though, Mike did see movement on the stage. Or he thought he did. He turned his head an inch forward to get a better look. No! Mike thought when he saw that Freddy and Bonnie were back on their feet. Mike tried to get to his own feet, but he couldn't. His blood loss was worse than he thought, because the floor felt like the deck of a ship at sea. Mike tried again to push off the floor. He began to raise his upper body, and then he stopped. He found the yellow rabbit. It was coming his way. Because of the disorienting laser lights, the rabbit looked like it was winking in and out of existence as it approached. It was hard to focus on. That, however, didn't prevent Mike from noticing that the rabbit was pulling out... from where? A huge butcher's knife. Mike looked behind him. Freddy and Bonnie were still advancing toward the front of the stage. At the snail-like pace Mike was moving, it wouldn't take the animatronics long to reach him. Mike turned front again. The rabbit was closer. Mike looked left and right. A wall on one side, the tables on the other. He was cornered. Abby was barely breathing, which was a good thing. Not only did it keep her quiet, but it kept her from having to inhale the scuzzy scent of the old, dusty plastic balls. The cruddy, powdery surface of the balls made her... Uh-oh. Abby crinkled her nose and attempted to hold in the sneeze that tickled her nostrils. But she couldn't. Because she was trying to muffle it, Abby's sneeze came out as a hiss. But it still came out. And it was still loud enough for... Strong hands clamped onto Abby's shoulder. She felt herself being hoisted upward. Abby immediately started kicking and screaming. She tried to twist herself free, but Abby was held tight. She came out of the ball pit, and she let out another sneeze. She turned to face... Vanessa?
Vanessa?
Abby stopped fighting, and Vanessa pulled Abby the rest of the way out of the pit. She let Abby get her footing on the floor. Abby brushed herself off as she gaped at Vanessa, and at Foxy. Vanessa was holding the kettle prod that Abby had last seen in Mike's hand, and Foxy was on his back, jerking around like he was having a fit. Abby threw her arms around Vanessa's waist. Vanessa used her free hand to return the hug. Abby pulled back.
I don't know what's happening to our friends,
she said.
I don't know why they're trying to hurt us.
Vanessa knelt down in front of Abby. Vanessa's hair was loose, and it was tangled around her face. She looked wild, but when she spoke, her voice was calm. Abby, sweetheart, they're not themselves right now. Abby nodded. She felt like she was going to cry, but she didn't. Vanessa took one of Abby's hands. Listen, Abby. There's someone here who wants to hurt us very badly. I need to get you somewhere safe, and then I need to go help your brother.
I can help too.
Vanessa started to shake her head, but then her gaze went to Abby's chest. Abby frowned, looking down to see what Vanessa was looking at. She didn't see anything icky on her overalls. So, what was the problem? Abby lifted her gaze to Vanessa's face. Vanessa's eyes were wide, and she had that look that people got when they had an idea.
What?
Abby asked. The drawings. Vanessa said. Her voice was a half-whisper, like she was amazed by something. She looked into Abby's eyes. Yes, the drawings. Vanessa tucked the cattle prod under her arm and grabbed Abby's shoulders. You're right, Abby, she said. You can help. Abby made a face. Huh? Vanessa started talking really fast. Your friends, they don't remember. He hurt them badly. He took their families, their love, their lives. But they don't remember.
I don't understand.
Vanessa let go of Abby's shoulders. She reached out and pulled Abby's drawing pad from her overalls chest pocket. You know what happened to them, Vanessa said. But they don't remember. Vanessa pulled out Abby's pencils and used them to tap on the pad. So, tell them. Abby looked from her pad and pencils to Vanessa's face. What? Abby suddenly jumped back to a memory, a really recent one. She remembered seeing the spot-lit drawing, the one of the yellow rabbit and the 5 kids, and her mind showed her the drawing again. She saw each of the kids in close up. She saw the biggest smiles drawn on their faces. The memory fell away, and Abby looked at Vanessa. The picture? Vanessa nodded, smiling. Abby reached out for her pad and pencils.
You're right. I have to help them remember.
The yellow rabbit bore down on Mike, waving the butcher's knife in the air like it was a baton, and the rabbit was a depraved orchestral conductor. Mike couldn't stand and run. He couldn't drag himself away at the speed of light. He couldn't sink into the floor or turn invisible. All he could do was look up at the rabbit and say, "Go to hell!" The rabbit kicked Mike in the face. Mike's head recoiled, and the back of his skull hit the floor. The mother of all headaches kicked in instantaneously. Hot, thick, coppery liquid filled Mike's mouth. It started to run down his throat. He gagged and spit it out. Mike tried to get his eyes to focus, but they didn't want to cooperate. They were somewhere out in a la-la land of meadows filled with butterflies. That was okay. Mike wasn't going to cower like a wimp. Somebody what strength he still had. Mike turned his head to face the rabbit again. "I said," Mike said as clearly as he could, "go to..." The rabbit kicked Mike again. This time, Mike's resolve to be hard failed him. His head bounced off the floor again, and the meadows and butterflies turned into a confusion of laser lights and crooked teeth and evil eyes in an inky, churning vision of hell. Mike saw this mind-choking landscape through a vapor of gray. Even so, he was able to see the knife raised above his chest. As he fought to stay conscious and began to lose the battle, Mike heard, "That's enough!" Was that Vanessa's voice? It didn't matter. Mike agreed. He'd had enough. He stopped fighting. He closed his eyes and let his consciousness take a break. Tucked behind a battered pinball machine that was missing its glass, Abby sat cross-legged on the floor. She was hidden, but she could still see the dining room. She was bent over her drawing pad, her pencil scribbling as fast as she could make it move. When Abby shouted, though, Abby looked up. Abby had to press her lips together to stop a cry from coming out. Her brother was lying totally still on the floor. Blood was all around him. A yellow rabbit, holding a knife, stood above Mike. Vanessa was maybe 20 feet behind the rabbit, and she held a gun in both hands, the way Abby had seen on TV. On TV, though, cops' hands didn't shake the way Vanessa's hands were shaking. The rabbit's knife stopped in midair, but the rabbit didn't turn around. Vanessa's hands shook even harder. Abby wanted to watch what was happening over by her brother, but the only way that she could help Mike was to keep drawing, so she looked back down at her pad. As she did, she thought she saw movement to her left. Abby glanced that way. Nothing. Where was Foxy? Was he still down? It didn't matter. Abby had to finish her drawing. From the dining room came the sound of a low growl. From the rabbit, Abby thought. She caught her lower lip between her teeth and put her pencil to the page again. "Drop the knife," Vanessa said. Abby started splitting her attention between the drawing and what was going on with Vanessa and the rabbit. That wasn't a hard thing to do. Abby was used to watching TV while she drew. She knew Mike thought she didn't watch the TV, but she did. Abby drew, and Abby watched as the rabbit, back still to Vanessa, began to remove the rabbit costume head. Vanessa's shaking got worse. Abby could see now that the person inside the rabbit suit was a man with graying dark hair. "A little old for temper tantrums," the man said. Then he turned. "Aren't we, Vanessa?" he said. Abby's pencil faltered. She didn't like the look of the man at all. He had a thin face and a high forehead. He also had very narrow eyes. He looked slimy. "I'm not kidding, Dad," Vanessa said. "Drop it." "Dad?" Abby thought. "Vanessa." "It's over," Vanessa said. "I don't think so, sweets," the man said. "You may have forgotten your loyalties, but I assure you they have not." The man gestured toward Freddy and Bonnie, who were at the front edge of the stage. They were standing at attention. "Go on," the man said to the animatronics. He pointed at Mike. "Rip him into little bitty pieces." Freddy and Bonnie trotted across the stage, heading to its short flight of stairs. They weren't walking quite right, but they were walking well enough to get Mike much faster than Abby wanted them to. The man in the rabbit suit looked at Vanessa. "Now, why don't you put that silly thing away and help Daddy clean up the mess you made?" He took a step toward Vanessa. "We both know you won't actually use it." The sound of the shot made Abby's pencil scoot across the page in a jagged line. The point of the pencil gouged the paper. Abby ignored both the line and the hole in the paper as she kept drawing. At the same time, she saw the man kind of jump backward. He looked down at his shoulder. Abby could see that Vanessa's bullet had put a hole in the rabbit suit. And the man. The man didn't seem to be bothered by the bullet, but he was angry. Abby could tell. The man snarled at Vanessa and put his rabbit head back on. Then he charged toward her. Abby wasn't insulted by the next 3 times the gun fired. She knew she didn't have much time left, so she forced herself to keep drawing, even as she watched Vanessa's shots go past the rabbit. Vanessa was shaking too much to aim right, Abby thought, and that was why the man in the rabbit suit was able to reach Vanessa. He grabbed her by the throat. "You had one job," the rabbit said. "Keep him in the dark, and kill him if you found out too much." Vanessa spit at her dad's face. "That's 2 jobs," she said. "You tell him," Abby thought, still drawing. "Shut up!" The yellow rabbit screamed. At the same time, he shoved a big awful knife into Vanessa's stomach. Abby felt her own stomach get really tight, and she felt like she was going to throw up. But she didn't. She kept drawing. The rabbit dug his fingers tighter around Vanessa's throat and lifted her up. Vanessa's feet flopped in the air several inches above the floor. Abby screwed up her face. Abby was so scared for Vanessa that Abby thought she could feel icky, furry rabbit fingers wrapped around her own neck. But she kept drawing. Vanessa cluttered her dad's chokehold. She tore her dad's hand, but he didn't let go. As she fought, Vanessa looked toward Mike. Abby shot a glance at her brother, too. Her pencil made one last mark on the pad. Freddy and Bonnie had almost reached Mike. "Time to go!" Abby got up and ran. Vanessa was again staring into the evil rabbit's eyes. The rabbit, still choking Vanessa with one hand, was totally focused on her. He didn't see Abby at first, but Vanessa did, and she smiled. Abby ran toward the wall of pictures, her drawing flapped like birds' wings in her hand. "No!" the man in the rabbit suit yelled. "Uh-oh," he'd seen Abby. Abby flicked a look at the rabbit, but she didn't slow down, not even when the rabbit let go of Vanessa's neck and turned toward her. "Stop!" Vanessa shouted. Abby knew Vanessa wasn't talking to her, but Abby's steps faltered when she saw that Vanessa had dropped her hands. Vanessa was gripping the blade of the knife, which was sticking out of her stomach. The rabbit still had one of his hands on the other end of the knife. The rabbit looked down. Grunting, he tried to tug the knife out of Vanessa's belly, but Vanessa wouldn't let go. Abby could see that Vanessa was hurting bad. Vanessa's face was really white, and it was all twisted up, but she still managed to say in a gasp, "I won't let you hurt her, too."